invited you here because I want to talk to you a little bit about crime. In particular, we're going to be talking about 2008 crime. And 2008 crime is what we consider to be crime index. And a crime index is the citizen's report card. It lets you know the temperature of your community. Tells you whether it's hot, it's cold, it's warm, or how you like it. It talks about a lot of things that you don't see when you deal with crime, unemployment, education, poverty, and all those kinds of root causes that cause crime. When you add crime index, you have two categories. You have violent crime in this category, and you have property crime. The total of these two is called a crime index. And one of the reasons why we're here, we want to tell you something because I think we have carved out a little success in Columbia in 2008. I spent some time this week complimenting officers on the road for the work that they've been doing. The other thing I would tell you is that we have a great community in Columbia. They work very, very hard and diligently with the police department. We will never, ever be successful in defeating crime, or having a war on crime, or reducing crime without citizens' input. And we have a tremendous community that has provided a lot of feedback to help us solve some problems. If you just focus on the first four crimes, which is homicide, rapes, robberies, and aggravated assault, you'll find out right here at this number here, there's a 22% decrease in violent crimes. That means that we've had a 22% decrease in the number of people that have been killed, raped, assaulted, or robbed compared to 2008. What's particularly interesting, I think, is a very success story for the city of Columbia is this is the lowest violent crime that we've had in 14 years. And I want you to think about that. The lowest violent crime rate in 14 years. Think about, ask yourself, what were you doing 14 years ago? I'm sure some of you looking at the camera were probably still in school, perhaps maybe in grade school 14 years ago. It has been that long since our violent crime rate has ever been that low. Here are the numbers. I think we have this data that we're going to give out to you. I think it's very, very interesting. Let me tell you, violent crimes is a pretty good indicator of how violent your community is. The state of South Carolina leads the nation in violent crime. It's not something that we're all proud of, or we shouldn't be proud of, or we should be embarrassed by. The other thing I wanted to mention is this number of aggravated assaults. An aggravated assault, if you don't know, is an effort by somebody to try to kill you, but they didn't succeed. Okay? I mean, either they shot you with a gun, they stabbed you with a knife, or they beat you over the head with a baseball bat, and you had to go into the emergency room, and you would have to see a trauma surgeon to put you back together. But when you look at those numbers for aggravated assaults here, you see that number is 756, and that is a 14-year low. One of the reasons why I want to point that out to you is this is the reason why aggravated assaults are important, because that is an indication of community safety. And one of the victories when we look at the decrease in violent crime is that we know when we reduce violent crime in our community, we also reduce the fear factor in our community. And when you reduce the fear factors in communities and you reduce the fear factors in neighborhoods, people tend to cooperate with their police. We have built very good positive relationships, meaning that people are giving us information to help us solve crime. We can see that in our homicide rate, and we can also see that in reduced aggravated assault. One of the interesting thing about the interesting thing about violent crime is you have a reduction in crime. It means that it actually goes away, time in law enforcement, we displaced crimes to other neighborhoods. What you see when you look at the totals for violent crime, you see far fewer, which is 342 fewer crime, and that's a victory for our community. That tells you that the police department and our citizens have a great handshake. Now, what you see on the property crimes, at the bottom here, we can see that crime has gone up. Property crimes, 14% increase compared with 2007. And when you look at the totals, when you add up violent crime and you add up property crimes, we see an overall increase in crime in the city of Columbia. One of the things that we're proud of, and I think this speaks volume for the police force, given the challenges that we've had with going out and recruiting people, with the number of vacancies that we have, the shortages that we have, you tend to under-police your community. So this tells me that the officers are doing a very, very good job. It also is an indication to me that we have a very good relationship with our citizens. And I think this is good for the citizens of Columbia, because this is something that we can brag about. We can brag that we have made great efforts in reducing violent crime, and it's at a 14-year low today. Let me just stop, and I'll get into some questions. But I want to tell you, if you look at this number right here of aggravated assaults, you see 756, 358. Out of those 358 aggravated assaults, somebody tried to kill you, but they didn't succeed. You were able to walk away and talk about it. Well, 137 of that number, of that 137, I'm sorry, out of the 756 number, say it keeps bouncing back through, but 137 out of this 756 numbers, people were confronted with guns. That means that somebody had a gun confronting them. 137 of those people, there was actually 220 victims with a gun. Out of that 137 victims that was confronted with a gun, about 51 of them were shot with a gun and survived their wounds. I want to go back to your homicides. When we get back in here, you see that we had 12 homicides this year as opposed to 16. Okay? So when you think about 51 people being shot with the guns, perhaps maybe that could have been 25 or 35 people killed. All right? I want to end with you and tell you that reducing crime saves money. Think about that for a minute. And how do you reduce crime and save money? One homicide, and we had a reduction of 4. One homicide is equivalent of, it costs a community $1 million for each homicide. If you add the cost of what it costs to incarcerate somebody once you convict him, if a person goes to the hospital and he dies as a result in there, the hospital bills. If you look at the officer salaries or detective salaries that are put into working those homicides, if you're looking at the prosecutor or the solicitor's office and the efforts in prosecuting people, one homicide is equivalent to $1 million. So when you go back and you look at that number, it says we had 4 fewer homicides in 2008 than we had 2007. That's a $4 million saving when you look at it. Let me go back here to this number, back to the aggravated assault. Let's talk about cost. On this number here, the 756 people that went in there, well, about 224 of those people were uninsured, meaning that they didn't have insurance when EMS picked them up and took them to the emergency room and the trauma surgeon put them together. Well, that cost that you have for those uninsured people is about $20 million at best, when you look at that. The cost, the medical cost involved in those shootings, and it's probably far greater than that. All I'm talking about is the shootings. So when you look at that, I just showed you that you spend $4 million on homicide and $20 million on aggravated assault, and we have a budget of $25 million. So I think that's a great savings to the taxpayer. Stop.